The Museum of the Highwood has been part of the community for more than 55 years. Our collection focuses on the history of southern Alberta. The flooding of 2013 hit High River so fast that we had very little time to respond. There was no warning at all. We worked as quickly as we could to get everyone out and move whatever we could out of the basement. We had no time to move any of our artifacts at the off-site storage facility. We had an excellent disaster plan, but there wasn't even time to think about anything. We just had to leave. Finally, after 11 days, we found out that the businesses from downtown High River were allowed to come back in. So we walked over and we got halfway down the stairs and we saw that the mud had flooded the entire collection.
Disaster recovery in the aftermath was a very steep learning curve. When Highwood flood happened, I really felt the real calling and need to go and help them. And so the first day that it was open, that they were allowed into their collection, I ran down to High River with all the things I could think of, bringing a wash sink, towels, soap, all kinds of things, and to see if I could help. And as it turned out, as soon as I arrived at High River, they were pulling the textiles out. So I helped that day. As it turned out, the facility there was really difficult, really challenging to work at. There was workmen who were trying to clean the place. There was workers who were there hired by the restoration company. There were conservators. It was just complete chaos. We just took picnic tables from across in the park and set up big Rubbermaid bins, and I had one little wash sink and one hose, and we just, as things came up, tried to get the mud out of them and try to figure out, should we save it, should we not, is it worth having more treatment done. We hadn't had large-scale flooding like this. People didn't have a lot of experience on what to do and how to do it. I mean, it's one thing when you have a pipe broken and you have 10 things that are wet. It's a total other thing when your 10,000-piece collection is under mud. When you're dealing with it with your wet hands in the mud, it's very hard to switch and be a photographer because you're dealing with a digital camera. So, you know, a dedicated person taking photographs, a scribe beside, writing down what the photographs are of, would have helped this project quite a lot. 10,000 pieces in the museum collection, and about 7,000 were destroyed in the flood. So the 3,000 that are remaining, it's like, how can we save them, and what's the best thing for us to do?
And unfortunately, most things, because they'd sat for so long, like anything that was wood, furniture, paper, anything like that, unless it was an extreme priority, just had to go into the dumpster.
Things are coming up at such a rate that you can't possibly get on top of it without a huge crew of people, and there were only a few people there. After the initial conservator crew left, there sometimes wasn't always time to rinse things off before they had to get bagged. I mean, in the meantime, the town was working under a big pressure to get the museum out of that space. So the museum was under a lot of pressure to work quicker than they maybe would have liked to. I mean, ideally, if you have more time, you can label things, you can sort things, but when you're scrambling to save things, sometimes those steps get missed. The severity of this flood changed the way I think about preventative conservation and collections management. So we always had to figure out the best way, or the best technical way to deal with things, and the standards are that you wash it off with water and then bag it, blot it dry, bag it if you're going to freeze it. Later, when we got the stuff frozen, it was hard because we didn't know how many pieces were in a box. One thing we learned in the freezing process is that people need to remember, like how you do your laundry, white, colored, black. And when you're sorting textiles, you need to put them into those colors, because the biggest damage we had was when the green skirt was beside the pale pink dress. And of course, the green dye ran all over the pale pink dress. One of the challenges in this project is that we had a lot of disassociation of numbers. And what that means is that with good intentions, small paper tags were attached to objects, waiting for a permanent number to be affixed to the object. And in the case when a permanent number was not affixed, the paper tag is fine, and it's good to have a paper tag and a permanent number, but in some cases there was only a paper tag. And what happened in the turbulence of the water is a lot of those tags came off the objects or got so much mud on them that you couldn't actually read the number. There were about 10,000 objects in the database before the flood. There's right now on inventory about around 3,000. So that means there's about 7,000 pieces that have been either thrown out, disappeared, washed away, deaccessioned because they were too damaged to be kept into the collection. And of those 3,000, there's probably about 1,000 of them that we don't really know what their number is, or their number was disassociated. And of that now, we've been able to reassociate at least 600 of them. So we still have about 400 roughly items that we're still trying to find the number for, reassociate it, and get the collection back to normal.
You want to have a really great photograph that clearly provides you with all the visual information that you can get from an artifact. What a maker's mark is, what a distinctive feature is, if it has a mark on the side, what was the original patina or surface covering on an object before a disaster occurred. So when you're doing all your conservation and treatments, you have a better and clearer idea what you want to return the object or artifact to.
Your database needs to have a photo of the piece, measurements, and then you need to have a permanent label on your object. And when you have that, then your disassociation is less likely to happen. One of the biggest things we learned in this project was what tissue paper does when it gets wet and muddy. And it doesn't handle very well. It kind of acts like toilet paper. It attracts dirt and it becomes awful, dirty, muddy, heavy, and it damages the textile that it's lovely interleafed between. So instead of using tissue paper, one product that we found is it's a spun-bonded polypropylene non-woven fabric. Might be a bit better solution than tissue paper. In optimal storage and in the new storage the temporary storage they have at the moment, the first shelf when you come in is all flagged on the most important pieces. So in your museum storage collections, you should be able to identify which are your 15 or 20 most important things that you need to get out first, and have them accessible, maybe on the first shelf, maybe color-coded with reflective tape that you can see glow-in-the-dark tape, because if there's no lights, you might need a flashlight and find out where's your emergency shelf for everything that's important, and try to get those pieces out first. When you think of a disaster plan, it's actually a methodology of thinking of your workers. Like, you can't, in the time of disaster, go to a plan and tell you what to do, because it's too late then. You need to have workers that will understand when it's a disaster, this is the most important thing to do, and this is how we're going to start. And the first thing is also safety. Is it safe for us to go in and work?
More often than not, volunteers will live much closer than other professionals that you will have coming on site for a disaster. And so ensuring that they're really familiar with the collection, they know what the priority items are, where the priority items are, will probably help a greater success and outcome in the long run. Coming into this and seeing and being exposed to such an aggressive work has been an excellent eye-opener for me, and a great opportunity to experience new skills and be creative with how I approach treatments.
By showing, when people see the scope of the damage and the disaster, they understand. They're not as quick to judge what you might have done. And by sharing what you've done, people can learn, and then they can have more empathy to what you've achieved.